So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Career Talk Thursdays. Again, I'm Primsel. I'll be your host for today, and this is one of our career talks, and we will be talking about leading others. And this topic is for fresh graduates, Gen Zs, or young millennials who want to enhance their leadership skills in a workplace setting. Without further ado, let's all welcome our guest speaker today. Before that, I would like to introduce Ryan K. Cruz. He is the visionary and founder of Nippon Hasha and AOJ Uma Incorporated. He presides as the CEO of these companies that own and operate brands such as Ramen Yushoken, Mendokoro Ramenba, Kazunori Japanese Restaurant, Marudori, and soon to be launched 1210. Before being an entrepreneur, Ryan had numerous stints in sales, marketing, and also brand management for Unilever Philippines for Selecta for several years. He has had a number of businesses in the last 2 decades in different industries such as logistics, finance, and gaming and amusement. Currently, he has businesses in both the food and beverage and the fine dining, fast casual, and food kiosk spaces, as well as the automotive sector. He's also active in doing consultancy work and speaking engagements for leadership and organizational culture and providing mentorship to several restaurant and business owners as well. Lastly, he is an active member of Entrepreneurs Organization or EO and is a representative and champion for the F&B sector for Asia. So let's all welcome Ryan Cruz.
Thank you so
Hi, Sir
much.
Ryan.
Hello, thank you, and thanks for having me here. Such a pleasure. So everyone's probably having their lunchtime by now, huh? So good afternoon, guys. Hello, friends, and I've been given the amazing opportunity to share not just a selected topic for today, but my amazing journey with you as well. So you may or may not be familiar with the brands, and allow me to provide a little background before I get on to the topic. So just give me a second so I can share my screen.
Really excited for this session as you know the brands have been the F&B must go places. So if you haven't heard of them, visit the different restaurants that Ryan has.
Thank
I'll
you.
give
I
the floor to
appreciate that.
Ryan.
Thank you. Thanks so much. So it still surprises me to say this, but this is a company and a product I envisioned about 15 years ago and actually put up in the last 10. And I'm often asked by people why I got into this. Maybe because they thought I'm crazy, because it is a difficult industry. And aside from dabbling in some certificate courses in a culinary school called ISCAN, some of you might be going there now, or you might be across. It's just across Ateneo. For one, I've always loved and been fascinated at how food has played such a central role in our daily lives and society in general. In the olden days, very often it's a bar or a tavern that was built after a place of worship as one of the first things that people build. I guess now it's malls. But that just speaks of how our daily interactions revolve how we choose to nourish ourselves. And what I've loved about Japanese cuisine in particular is how it requires so much patience, commitment, and discipline to turn what is seemingly available to everyone into something extraordinary. Perhaps that's why in the last 2.5 years in the lockdown, it's actually Japanese food that's proven to be the most resilient. Why? Because number one, it's difficult to purchase the ingredients, it's difficult to procure. So it's difficult to prep and it's difficult to cook, never mind trying to have the same presentation as professional chefs can do. So it's difficult to replicate in the house. Now, ramen of all things, I feel is the pinnacle of that. A paradox in itself where you have something that looks so deceptively simple, but it's so incredibly complex and also tedious to do. In fact, there's a joke in the Japanese industry among chefs that before you consider becoming a ramen chef, you actually should consider committing suicide first. And that, while it's funny, that should give you an idea itself on the level of commitment required. So it's a business, as I said, that we started 10 years ago, and since then we've received amazing support from everyone. And it's certainly been one hell of a journey, and I actually feel that we're just getting started. Our lines are probably as famous as our food, and if any of you guys were a part of that, I'd like to give my sincere thanks and appreciation for your patience and support. It's not something that we're not addressing, which we are, which I'll get to in a second. So far, we have 9 branches, including the other brands. Pasay was our last one. If you've ever been there, it's probably one of our most gorgeous branches. It's in the back of IKEA, or what they call MOA Square. And some of you are probably wondering, why do you guys only have 9 branches? And why do you hate the North? You don't have a branch there. So you'll be happy to know that we will actually have a branch in Ortigas by maybe the end of the year, and in QC, at least one location in QC by next year or next summer. But these are questions that need to be talked about, because first of all, we've always done things quite differently. When you start a business, it's always a mixture of excitement and paranoia. Excitement because entrepreneurs are so passionate about our ideas and what we believe in, while having the paranoia to know that no business is foolproof. Now, I guess, as I've said earlier, we've always done things very differently. Where, for one, I regard size as, honestly, they're metrics of vanity. Any company can go for scale or size. And when you scale, there's actually a lot of danger in that, because a lot of things can fall by the wayside. So I see, and I also mentor some people who want to have like 100 branches. They want to have 50 branches. It's sort of become their identity that they're the fastest growing X, Y, or Z. And I always tell them, you might end up compromising, number one, your product, and number two, your people. So we take a slow and careful approach, because the customers will always be the heroes in our story. And aside from my own team members as well, which is obviously related to this topic, what we do is we try to carefully curate the experience and location of each one, and really treat the brand and the business as I feel it's very special as well. So if you're wondering about the numbers that I'm sharing, these are pretty high numbers for the amount of branches that we have. So it's almost like we're an upscale casual restaurant while having the volume of a fast food, quick serve restaurant as well. And again, it's something to be very grateful. And another thing that I am quite grateful of, and I perhaps consider myself lucky, are my chefs. So a lot of people come up to me today and they tell me, "Hey, Ryan, we've actually removed ramen from my food itinerary already." And the reason for that is because when people recommend a ramen joint, we try it and we actually prefer yours more. And while that may not be true for everyone, of course, when I hear that, for me, that's a dream, for you to even come close to its place of origin. But when I have the time, I share to them what I will share to you now as well. And there's actually a very good reason for that. Now, if you Google the words ramen heads, like gearhead or motorhead, someone crazy and fanatical about ramen, what you will find is a movie, or like a soft documentary about a guy named Osamu Tomita. So in your screens, he's a guy standing up with a white bandana with some design on top. Now, the movie's about him, and he is the current and multiple ramen champion. Now, when I visited his place in 2016, there was at least a 3.5 hour line. Now I heard after the movie it's 6 hours. And with us officially being in the blue classification, and with Japan opening in October 11, you might want to take a visit. But yeah, it is 6 hours. Now, this guy again is the current and multiple ramen champion, and the guy that he beat, his name is Mita of Rokorinsha, where he has a tiny depachica in the Tokyo station, where if you search for it, anyone from Anthony Bourdain to David Chang are going crazy and waxing lyrical about his ramen. So these two guys are actually the apprentices for chefs. And you can see why I say that, there's not very many things that you can get lucky in business, but this truly is one of them. And I'm quite lucky because they're so open. Sometimes you work with chefs and you think that, you get into a partnership and you got it going for yourself, but some of them actually don't share all their secrets. They can be quite secretive. So I'm quite lucky because they're quite active, especially the guy on the left with his arms crossed. His name is Aoyama-san. The guy seated is Yamagishi-san, or the ramen god. And the guy with his arms crossed standing up as well is Tashiro-san. So they are our 3 chefs. And what you'll see in the movie, in fact, the screenshot is from the movie, is that Tomita-san attributing and owing his success to them. In fact, when you eat in his restaurant, you also see photos of our chef. So extremely grateful for them. In fact, I just flew in from Cebu with Aoyama-san last night to check on our branch there that's been there for 7 years. And the principle that I have, which allowed me to have an insight into opening the business, is still the same principle that I carry with me today with my team. And that is that your standards always have to be higher than your customers. Otherwise, how can you impress them? How can you impress someone who knows better than you, right? So we are in the business, aside from providing experiences, of educating our customers as well. And we know that we've been doing this for 10 years. So the customer who's been eating with us or going to our places are getting more educated and learning more things every time they eat. So if the gap was this big 10 years ago, it's gotten a lot smaller. And that is the challenge for us, to really look at every single detail. Perhaps when I have people who join my team and they're probably frustrated at how so fanatical I am about every single detail. This is the reason why. Because there are days where the desired outcome is not what you intended. Even with the very best of intentions, things can go wrong. And when you falter, if this is your potential and you go a level down and your customer has already educated himself, when this happens, that's where you get complaints. Because they know that it's not supposed to be this way. Right? So it's a constant reminder and a challenge for ourselves to always do better. And in fact, it's one of our core values, which is evolving, always growing, always evolving. Now, as Frimcell introduced me, she did say that I was a mentor to a lot of people, to a number of people who have businesses in the industry. Now, and many of you, I think, would be trying to get into business as well or thinking about it. If you are, I'd like to touch on probably the three reasons that people want to get into it, because I think we need to have this conversation. The first is that they simply want to have more time. The second is because they want to be their own boss. Starting to sound familiar. And the third is simply because they want money, right? So here's the problem. The first is a fallacy. The second is misunderstood. And the third is a journey that's going to take you much longer than you think. You're not going to have more time. You're avoiding working 6 to 8 hours on a desk job so that you need to work 12 to 14. Like 12 to 14 hours is, guys, it's completely normal for me. And I'm not saying that in an arrogant way. It's just my way of life now. Like my parents don't understand it because I'm a first generation entrepreneur. They're wondering why I'm always gone. But this is really what's necessary in order to build a business. The second is, if you want to be a boss just for the sake of being a boss, you've already lost the plot. Being the old boss from the 1970s, 80s, and 90s is not the way to lead a team. It's actually being in service of them. This is what you need to do. People are also a lot smarter now on what they demand from their mentors. And third is, most people, when I get invited to look at these theses discussions and presentations, it's so funny because from my perspective, business plans they're useless. Because when you make a business plan, by their very nature, a lot of those factors, almost all those factors are dynamic. And thus, if you change one thing such as the price or the purchasing power of a consumer, which changes all the time, then the whole business plan goes to shit, right? Sorry for the language. When you talk about profit, first of all, if you're doing it properly and you're really building your business properly, you will not want to take out funds from it. It's almost like taking out funds from your family to fund like another boyfriend or girlfriend or a mistress. That's just wrong. You don't look at it to fund as a way of funding your lifestyle. If there is profit, you should look for ways in order to strengthen the business. As far as I'm concerned, at least for this company alone, before I saw a single peso aside from my salary as a managing director, it took me 4 years. Guys, 4 years. I first built Yushukan Alabang, and then we invested in our gyoza and noodle commissary. After that, we invested in our soup commissary. After that, we had a proper office, and then Mendo Koro Makati, and then Yushukan Cebu, and only then did I see profit. Because that's a way to do it. That's the way to provide the right foundation for your business. And when you do get into it, what you need actually is to know, why are you doing what you're doing? And if you agree with Sayori, what you want is a higher purpose, your Northern Star, because this is really what's going to carry you as a highly principled individual such as he is. So, just very quickly, I'd like to share probably what I call my three whys. Why am I doing what I'm doing? And I like to describe it as three concentric circles from the order of importance that it has. So the first is, well, surprise, surprise. It's as an individual, it's also financial stability. But for me, I consider this as a consequence and a byproduct, not really the objective. Again, because if you have money as the objective, you will most likely sacrifice the two things that I described earlier by trying to grow so fast. Because when people try to grow so fast, it's either because it's for their ego or vanity, or it's for profit, and you might end up compromising your product and your people. So if you know me well enough, you will know that I did not grow up with a fortunate childhood, and it's something that I'd like to be able to give to my daughter. Second is as a restaurant owner. Now, one of the biggest mistakes, probably the biggest mistake that I made in this business, is that I started again this business 10 years ago, but I only hired senior managers after 6.5 years. Why? Because I'm stupid and crazy. Well, the reality is I tried to be the best in everything, and it almost killed me. Now, I did not have anyone to help me with anything, whether you're talking about finance, restaurants, operation. Even I even used to be the one fixing our noodle machine and delivering the seasonings. Seasonings used to be stored in my house. And when you start a business, what you're essentially doing is you're self-employing yourself. And you're self-employed is if the business will not run without you. Take a vacation, no business, right? No profit. That's how you know you're self-employed. Now, my second why as a restaurant owner is because in the many years that I've been interviewing people, because again, I had no HR assistant, I discovered exactly what's wrong with the industry. And what's wrong with the industry is that too many restaurant owners are too focused on the customer experience. And what they're actually forgetting about is the employee experience. I interviewed many people and I heard many sad stories where they were being paid, for example, 1,500 every 2 weeks. Someone was told that the provincial rate, because she worked in Cavite, was $100 a day. Imagine that, $100 a day. And there are countless stories of verbal and physical abuse, even by celebrity chefs. And that's why when I see them being glorified, I'm like, wow, if only everyone knew. Of course, I can't talk about who they are. But it's my duty that when I get asked to be on these talks, that I always try to focus on the welfare of all the people in the industry, the people who are truly working for it. When I walk in 8 out of 10 restaurants, I really don't have a good time, guys, because 8 out of 10 times the staff are disengaged, and most of the time they think that just by saying po and opo or sir and ma'am that they're being respectful, and that's why the very same people, they wonder when the customer complains or the customer feels disrespected, and that's because their nonverbal cues give it away, their body language gives it away. So it's sort of my duty. I've made it my personal duty that I hope in 5, 10, or even 15 years, that I hope to reverse those numbers. That maybe, and I hope that 8 out of 10 restaurants that I walk in, that people are engaged. Because when people are engaged, that means they love their jobs. And if they love their jobs, that means they're being taken care of. And that's really it. It's like watching a movie. When you watch a movie and there are one or two bad actors, it's most likely just them, if the others are okay. But if everyone is bad, means that's the director, it's the management. So I've made it again my mission to show people that when they ask me and they ask the underlying question, how exactly do you guys do what you do? And while it's exceedingly complex, what I tell them is that take care of your guys, take care of your people. That's probably one of our secrets. Now, as a business owner, my biggest why is coming from the belief that providing jobs for people are one of the noblest things that you can do. Like when we had to pivot during the lockdown, where we came out with the take-home kits in just 9 days. My operations manager and my culinary manager went out because I couldn't go out because of the lockdown. So they were able to secure a pass. And I told them before they went out that, hey, what we're about to do is huge because a lot of people are out of work. And don't think of the 200, I think 40 at the time, names in our employee roster. What I wanted to do was reframe the responsibility in their shoulders, which is actually my responsibility as well. That our country has a average size household size of 4.2 members. That means we actually have more than 1,000 mouths to feed, and that is how I have to think. Because whenever I am in the care, I have someone's career under my care and my responsibility, I have to think of their families as well. And the conversations that I like to have with other business owners are not necessarily the number of jobs that we create or the kinds of jobs that we provide, but rather what kind of quality do those jobs have. So, related to that, and this is my segue into my main topic, are the two things that drive a business. Now, the first is painfully obvious. It's money, right? And this is one key takeaway that I want people to have. The second is something that not many people realize, which is, I actually already said earlier, which is the engagement of its people. And when you define the textbook definition of engagement, it's the promise of two entities to each other. Now, in any company, let alone the F&B industry, we're defined by our interactions. I mean, we face so many customers every day. And there's a reason why this business is regarded as one of the toughest you can get into. You're constantly moving stuff and interacting with people all the time. No 2 days are the same. And those interactions are built on the energy that starts and stops with every customer and requires people to be constantly giving it. So you have to look at engagement as the level of commitment that people give. Because some people, when they are not engaged, they're just going to give the bare minimum so that they don't get terminated. That's what happens in a lot of organizations. So, and disengagement, on the other hand, when people are not committed, it can happen physically, where you have seen cases probably in Facebook or Google and Microsoft where the workforce don't agree with certain policies that the management has, whether they don't stand up for women's rights or LGBT or whatever else, right? But the reality is that disengagement can happen mentally as well, and it actually happens all the time. It happens frequently. And this is very dangerous because rather than having someone giving 100 or even 120%, you have someone just giving 50%. Again, the bare minimum. And if you're just looking at the numbers, you're actually paying someone to do less than the other person who is engaged. And that is the reason why it's so important to talk about leading people. One of those things that we have to focus on is to look at engagement. Okay? So while it's going to be very difficult to cover this topic as a whole, I like to describe leadership and culture as it's something that it's almost like you have to learn a whole alphabet. And the only thing I can do today is sort of touch on maybe half a letter. So I will touch on what I feel are the most important things when we talk about leading people. And I feel that it's actually so ironic and so important to talk about it. Ironic because I don't know of any school that discusses and talks about these things and teaches people how to do these things in detail. Because these are some of the things that I wish that I knew before I got into business. So the first thing, you might be surprised, is that when you're actually going to lead a team, the first thing you should focus on is it's actually not your team, it's yourself. And I get this question all the time in interviews where people ask me, "What's the most difficult part about being a CEO or or leading a team?" And what I tell them is that is the pressure and the fact that I always have to grow myself. So if you're talking about working 10, 12, 14 hours, you do have to spend an inordinate amount of time reading. So growing yourself means taking in all the information of your chosen industry. It's taking, what's happening in the current events. Like If prices are going up, that's going to affect your business as well, and so on and so forth. But it's developing yourself, because if you we had a, like an imaginary or hypothetical scorecard above our heads, and I'm, for example, if I'm a 50 over 100, and for example my EA, who I regard as, at least a 90 over 100, I won't be able to keep her. And that's the reality of it. In order to keep your people, you need to actually be someone to be able to teach them. So developing yourself in terms of your emotional and mental and even physical aspects is so critical, because this is your foundation. Guys, you'll be in business or in your career, you'll be faced with a lot of problems. And human beings have this tendency to walk away from problems because they're mental pain. And you have to recognize and realize that we're just preconditioned to avoid pain, because in the olden times, it usually means getting hurt or even death. But we haven't evolved much over the years. And nowadays, what you have to realize is that you have to go where the problems are, because the problems and solving them are actually what provides value to everyone around you. And standing up in the moment to lead is actually one of the most critical things in being a leader. Now, second, which is probably one of the most obvious, concentrate on your people. And these are really relationships. You see that photo on the top right where I'm the guy with a white shirt with his arms crossed. That was, I think, taken March 29th, a few days before the launch of the Take Home Kits, March 29th, 2020. We launched the Take Home Kits 9 days after they announced the lockdown. And if you know us, if you know who we are, you know that this was a huge thing for us, because we didn't, we still don't allow takeout of finished products. But this was our way of keeping the business healthy, while managing to keep our DNA intact. But the reason why I'm telling you this story is that because when I walked in through those stores, and that's in Mendocoro, Makati, which is now Marudori Ramenba, when I looked at the people who showed up that day, and knowing so many more people who wanted to be there, I was reminded of the value of real human relationships. Because this is really what pulls a team together during the hard times. And the lack of it will cause a team to fall apart. And that is culture. And that is your relationship with your people. And it's called by some people as the ROR, or return on your relationships. There are many people who have told me, and I don't mean this in a, to put a spotlight on myself, but I'd like to use it as an example, that I've had many people come up to me and tell me that, sir, if it weren't for you, if it wasn't you asking me or asking us, I wouldn't have done it. Because there are many times when people don't have to do something that they need to do. Again, some guys just go for the bare minimum. And their commitment to you also depends on the kind of relationship that you have with them. So concentrate on the relationships. Really see how people are doing. When you ask them how are you actually mean it. Make time for people. But most people will say that they don't have the time. But if you are a true leader, you will actually make the time for people. And you will actually make time for people.
So, guys, we're just having technical difficulty. I know that we're in the middle of the presentation and we're just getting started in terms of the discussion. But if you have any questions, we'll just wait for Ryan to be back online so he can join us in this session. But if you have any questions, because we're seeing a lot of students coming from different universities all over the Philippines. So shout out to students from UST, NTC, STC Davao City, and Cagayan State University. So feel free to ask any questions at the moment while we wait for Ryan to be back in the stream. I know that a lot of students have joined us this afternoon. In the meantime, do we have like potential leaders in the group? Probably um, leaders in their student councils and such. This is a great opportunity for you. And I can see that Ryan is back online. So we'll just ask him to, yeah, there you go. Welcome back again, Ryan. Lost you for a
I'm
bit.
so sorry. Yeah, these
No
things
worries.
happen.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me share again my screen. Is that okay?
Great. Yep.
Say
Thank you.
okay. So yeah, we lost a bit of time there, but anyway, I'll continue. Thank you for filling in. Yeah. So I think I ended off making time for your people, and this is quite important. So I used to do a huddle with my guys, where in a huddle you talk about what you go through in terms of your personal struggles. And my biggest takeaway there in terms of emotion was actually embarrassment. It was shame. And the reason why I felt that is because I realized after doing those huddles is that someone in my team is always going through something at any given time. So if I was the typical boss where I would just come in and reprimand someone, if I didn't make the time, I wouldn't even know that the reason why they're underperforming is actually because they're actually going through something. And one of the most critical things that you need as a leader is empathy, is seeing their world through their shoes or their eyes. And anyone in your team, and even you guys, when you have mentors uh, taking care of your career and working very closely with you, you will always have three questions in your head. Most of the time, you will not know it, but you will have these three questions. The first is that you're probably wondering about your boss. Do you care for me? Like when I'm going through something, will you even care about enough for you to know and consider it in terms of being a factor to my performance? The second is, can you teach me? Now, this is one of the paradoxes of leadership, because you're probably wondering, I thought as a leader you're supposed to hire people who are better than you. But yes, that is true. But you're also supposed to help them in terms of insight and perspective and decision making, right? So again, it's the hypothetical or proverbial scorecards over our heads. You cannot keep people if your performance, if you yourself, you're not doing very well. So that is your foundation. And the third is, can I trust you? Will you take credit for the work that I've been doing for the past 2 months? Will you throw me under the bus when the time comes? And that's trust, and that's integrity, and that's reliability. And if you've ever heard of the trust triangle, where you have these three things, it's authenticity, it's care, and skill. Where if we were working for the next 5 years, and I fast forward time and I find that at the end of the 5 years you no longer trust me, it will always be down to these three things, guaranteed. Okay, so very, very important. Always remember that these three questions exist in everyone's relationship with someone. Okay, now the last and certainly not the least is paying attention to the environment, the culture of your people. Why? Because simply because humans are social animals, where you can take a bad person who came from a previously bad environment and put them in a good environment, and they actually make come out to be outstanding members of society and contribute. And you put an inherently good person in a bad environment, and they will probably turn out to do bad things. Now, we were not born with biases or being racists. It's our environment and all the feedback that we get that causes to be this way. Now, paying attention to the environment is so, so critical, especially when you're scaling your business, because I can't be everywhere anymore. It's culture that does that for me. It's the environment that I provide. It's invisible. It's unspoken. It's automatic. As I'm talking to you guys now, a lot of the performance of my guys is largely down to the environment that they're in. If they're not enjoying the workplaces or their team members, then they're not going to be able to be of service to our customers. And that's why our mission in our company is actually to provide the best customer and employee experiences. And you might be surprised at our vision. Our vision is not the number of branches or profit. Our vision is to be the most desirable place to work in, because that's part of my greater purpose, to leave my own little space in a much better place, right? So most of us business owners, we think of us being the gatekeepers, where we're standing with our arms crossed, looking at people, and deciding, okay, you you look like you're good enough to be on the team, or you're good enough to be on the bus, right? But a lot of us forget that sometimes it's a bus driver that's rotten. Sometimes it's the environment or the bus itself that's full of garbage and not being well maintained. We only tend to look outwardly and not ourselves. And in my position, it's very, very easy to fall into that trap, because I hear a lot of compliments. I hear a lot of good comments. And that's why when someone is a direct report to me, one of the things that I ask them is to be a mirror to me. So one of them, for example, is my executive assistant, where I tell her, you have to tell me what I really do in reality. So if I say something that's a bit arrogant, you have to tell me, sir, I don't agree with what you just said. Because I need to know these things for the sake of my people. One of the biggest reasons why companies fall by the wayside is ego, because no one is checking on the pride and the ego of the CEO. And what you will find is that if, for example, the grade of the CEO is 95 over 100 and the team is 50 over 100, the impact of the CEO is so huge that it's actually worth improving the 5% left of the CEO rather than the 50% of the team. That's how much impact we have in our positions. And very much related to that is the environment as well. So whether you agree or with Tywin Lannister's leadership style, he knew a thing or two about leadership, that it's actually from leadership that unity comes from. And this is really the environment and the culture that you provide. And from the unity of your team comes the strength of potentially being a world-class team. And if you're talking about world-class team, I'd like to show you a graph where you have the blue line that represents the 1% of all teams. And the red line represents probably the next 10%. So what you have here is a blue line representing the world-class teams, the red line representing the great teams, yellow for the good teams, and the green for the mediocre teams. And if you think that mediocre teams are actually less than 80%, 80% is about the number of businesses that fail. And most of the businesses that fail because of three reasons. One is because they were trend chasing in the first place. Like, it's a Me Too business. They didn't really have a purpose other than profit. Second is because of management indifference. And third is because of a string of bad decisions. So what you'll have to realize is that whatever industry you get into, I don't care what industry it is, almost all your problems will actually be people related. Even if they don't seem like they're people related, trust me, they are. Now, when you look at this graph, what you'll find is that a lot of teams can actually reach close to being great or world class. And the mark of a great team is not the highest highs that you can reach. That is not the metric. The question is, how bad is your worst performance? Because when you have just a good or mediocre team, as soon as a crisis hits, everything falls apart. This happened to them during COVID. When I see companies, and if you guys saw companies that closed during COVID, very often the business was already not healthy to begin with. The foundation was not there. And this is why I keep mentioning foundation, because it's so, so critical. If you don't build a proper foundation, if a storm comes, your business will fall. And a lot of sports figures know this as well, where you have to look at it in terms of you, your performance in terms of a long-term scale. It's so obvious when you have sports figures. When they get a bad game, you just say, oh, he had a bad game. But how come when it comes to our performance, we define who we are by those events? We don't say that, oh, it was a bad day for me, I'll bounce back. Right? It's so crystal clear in sports, but we seem to always validate ourselves from our last bad performance. So, and I'd like the message that I'd like to give to you guys as I end this talk is that if you're starting out your career and you're starting out the business, it's very likely going to take you much longer than you think. And you're going to come across a lot of difficulties and failures. And you have to know that there is no one who is successful that didn't go through a lot of this. If you take the resume of any successful person, whether it's Steph Curry or LeBron James or Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan or anyone else in any other sport, and you'll see the long list of achievements. If you ask them for their failure achievement, it's probably even longer than anyone else. And that's really the conversation that we need to be talking about. The realities of building a career and building a business versus the perception of it. In my industry, at least, perhaps the biggest myth that we have is concentrating again just on the customer experience. We have to disabuse ourselves from that. Many times, people like me get invited to these forums and they speak as if we know our customer more than anyone else. No, we don't. That's our ego speaking. The people who know my customers the best are my frontliners, the people who actually interact with them every day. They know our customers' names, even their children's, what their preferences are. The truth is that I am no longer connected to the direct results of the company. Business owners always say that their top priority is the customer, when in fact they haven't even talked to a customer in years. In our positions, if you want to be a boss too, you will have less of an impact to your customers than one of your guys. But what we can do is screw with someone's head or even their life, who will then impact the experience of my customer. But I can also choose to support someone who will then impact my clients. So when you talk about leading others, it's the realization that the team leaders are responsible for the team players who are responsible for the other team players who are responsible for the players, responsible for the customers. Get that chain right, that is the chain of command, and everything goes fine. You get that chain wrong, the people who are preparing my ramen, creating the ramen, talking to the customer, taking their order, figuring out how to manage the inventory, clean the equipment to make sure it's sanitized. In other words, all the heavy lifting. Get that chain wrong, and people will spend more of their energy protecting themselves rather than doing their job. Now, make no mistake, my methods always have its doubters. It always will have. Where instead of seeing is believing, with people I believe it, and therefore I will see it. And that's why it's so difficult, because for most it's a leap of faith. But without being this way, I would not have many people today who have proven to be critical in our business's health and growth. Now, I know that I have a lot of naysayers, but what I say to them is I can no longer be accused of being a dreamer if what I imagine now exists in reality. And that's why I tell my people that companies like us, and I hope this doesn't come across as arrogant, that companies and teams like us are very important for the industry because we prove that it's worth investing in your people. Now, you're probably asking, do we get everything right? Of course not. In fact, far from it. Now, are we operating completely opposite to how normal companies do, and what is the traditional business practice of the day? Absolutely. And are we headed in the right direction? You bet we are. And here's the best part. If you're only so keen on numbers, our numbers actually prove it. So to all the non-believers who think that numbers come first, numbers matter and performance comes before people, guess what? We outperform our competitors year after year after year and surprise even ourselves. So, my wish for everyone today is to remember that very often your ability to work well with people, whether you're employed or provide jobs, will oftentimes determine how successful you will be in what you do. And that success is built on building and maintaining your relationships. Before you get to do that, however, you need to develop yourself first. Because you can't build anything unless you build you. Some people in today's age of social media, where everyone is constantly comparing themselves to each other, believe that you have to be special in order to be successful, in order to do exceptional things. But guys, all that it really requires sometimes is someone with a purpose and the best of intentions. So start where you are, do what you have to do so that you can do what you want to do. Let's start small, and then when we're done, let's celebrate each other's successes. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Ryan. That was a very insightful session. I even learned a lot from my end. It's not every day that we are graced by a CEO in this session. So we're really thankful for having you here. And I know that the students who are here are also happy to have you in this session. We just have a couple of questions that we would probably ask you if that's all right.
Sure. I would
Mainly
love
in
to.
the leadership aspect. I guess the first question that we would like to know is, are leaders born or made? Because I know we have students here who would want to be in that leadership role in the future, but doesn't know where to start. So, in your opinion, are leaders born or are they made?
Okay. The answer to that's both. Um, some people have an inherent advantage in being a leader because you need to what okay the first thing I'll say is that when you are in a position of leadership, what you have to realize is that you will spend most of your time trying to convince people. All right. Now, being charismatic, for example, certainly helps. Being very good in communication, and that's why I always tell people develop your skill of communication. That's something where you cannot lose
Mm.
because communication is it's explaining yourself, putting your thoughts into words. It's asking how well you ask for a raise. It's how well you convince people, motivate people, inspire people, negotiate a lease for your company, etc., etc. So yes, some people have a natural disposition to be a leader and the tools needed to be a leader, but anyone can be one. It's it's so funny because when you go to a bookstore, there are a lot of self-help books, but hardly I've never seen a book where they teach you to help others. And this is really what being a leader is. It's making sure that you be of value to the person to your left and to your right. And like anything, leadership is a skill. It requires practice. No, it requires being more keen with your listening. It requires being more keen to controlling your emotions. Because one of the biggest things about leadership is that the cost of leadership, the price of leadership, is self-interest. And it's like being a parent, right? Where no one ever teaches you if you're an adult, if you're a parent, that oh, if your kid wants a drumstick, give the kid the drumstick, right? It's a natural disposition to give way to our kids. But somehow in the workplace, we don't have that instinct. So, but it's actually the same thing. Um, anyone like parenting has a capacity and potential to be a parent, right? It doesn't mean that everyone should be one. In the same way, everyone has a capacity and potential to be a leader, but it doesn't mean that everyone should be one too. And the reason for that is because it requires a change in lifestyle. And the change in lifestyle that it requires is your commitment to being of service, right? And then that's one of the biggest paradoxes that people think that they want to be a boss or a leader right away because they want to they equate it to the associated rewards that it has, such as the nice office,
Mm-hmm.
the and all of these things. But the reality is that the higher you go, the more work that you actually need to do, and the more pain that you need to absorb. Yeah. So in short, it's definitely something that anyone can develop, because like anything, it is a skill.
Right. Thank you for that. And in line with the what you've mentioned a while ago, that sometimes you go to a bookstore and there are book recommendation. One of our viewers today have asked from Ortilio Nicole Marie. So thank you so much for this, Mr. Ryan, for the inspiring talk. I'm just wondering if you have book recommendations for leadership.
Oh my God, there's so many. Where do I even start? I'm a huge fan of. His name is Patrick Lencioni.
Mhm.
If you could get that, Pat. Yeah, maybe my my EA could type it for you guys. But he has a series of books about leading and managing people. I'm a fan of Simon Sinek as well. He's one of the great
Yeah,
optimists of our time.
same.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. And probably in terms of running a team, Bill Yergin, that's another great author to look at as well. With Patrick Lencioni alone, I mean, you guys will need a lot of time to finish all his books. I've probably read 7 or 8 of his books already, and I think I still have about a dozen more. He has a number of books. And I love the question, because there's a reason why there's a saying that all leaders are readers. Again, because it speaks of how much you need to develop yourself. And you won't be able to change or develop yourself if you don't acknowledge that something needs to be changed as well. And that's humility.
Okay, thank you. I've shared I hope I'm getting the name correctly of Patrick Lane Sioni.
Let
It's available. Yeah, yeah. I also like Simon Sinek in terms of like concept of leadership and valuing people. So yeah, great question. That's a good start. Now, I know that there are a couple of viewers right now who are introverts. So one of the questions that pop up is, what's the best practical way to enhance leadership skills if you're an introvert? Because what common misconception is that if you're an extrovert, you're people oriented, you'll most likely be a leader, and introverts don't really have that skill. So are there any practical ways for them to be better?
Okay. Very interesting question. I have to admit it's not something that I've been asked about before. However, I don't view as being an introvert as a crutch. I would say that there will actually be some areas where you'd be better than extroverts, right?
Mhm.
Extroverts can be very bad in listening. We like to give our input and jump right in the conversation. So the first thing that I would do before I get into the meat of my answer is, whatever you're going through, always be honest about it, right? Like for example, my team was actually very shocked because I told them one time, oh, I'm actually seeing a psychiatrist, and the reason for that is because I wanted to know how bad my anxiety was, if it's something that should be medically treated. And while I discovered that it was just work or stress related, I did discover that I had what you call a compensated ADHD. But the reason why I share this with my team is because I don't want them to feel like I don't pay attention to them, because I have this condition where sometimes they see me and I'm alone, I'm sitting by myself, and they think I'm free to listen, but in fact I have a million things in my head. Now that's probably one of my downsides. Now, if you're an introvert, number one, I would be very open about what personality type you are. There's no personality type that defines what a good leader is. Second is that I would actually use that to your advantage. Be a much better listener than extroverts. Use your analytical nature. Take time to give your answers, because one of those things about being a leader is that the higher you go, the more weight your words have. In fact, at the very top, there's a saying that says that a whisper becomes a shout. So if I came in, during the lockdown in 2020, and I came in and I'm like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? Our restaurants are closed. If I acted that way, people would be like, holy cow, I need to start looking for another job, right? But uh, introverts can be less impulsive about these things, and you get time to construct your answers, because what you say to people is so critical. It can change a person's day or the path of their career. And then again, that is the price of leadership, because you have to be so careful about what you say. Now, a lot of the tools, practical tools of building leadership, again, it's not really related to a certain type. So I would say just use it to your advantage, be open about it, and just be who you are. Because when people feel that you're trying to be someone that you're not, they feel cheated and they feel manipulated. So just be honest about how it is and make people understand. I don't want to look like I'm not listening or I'm not going to address your concern. It's just that I'm the type of person that needs more time, because I want to be able to give value to you.
Thank you, Ryan. That's an interesting view on in that aspect. Now, another question that we've been asked is, what's one thing you wish you knew before becoming a CEO? I know some of students here might want to have their own company in the future. If you can turn back time and see,
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So the one thing that I didn't have time to share was my upbringing, my timeline. You'll be shocked to know that I'm a two-time school dropout. I got kicked out of school, both in high school and both in college as well. So I never really did well in school. I started my first business when I was 16 years old. That's one of the reasons why I never paid attention. I just wanted to get out there and start working. But if there was one skill, because I'll answer this on two levels now. One is a skill, and one is a soft skill that I should have wanted to develop. One is accounting, because honestly, 99% of my subjects in school don't really have any relevance to what I'm doing now. But if there's one thing that I wish I paid attention to, it's accounting. And I only got I barely passed my accounting class, and it's only because I copied also from my seatmate's exam. So that's one. I wish I had a better grasp of accounting, because anytime you get into business, you need to understand all the financial cycles of your structure. The second is, again, we go back to the topic today. I wish that I developed myself more in terms of building myself. Okay, and I hope I have time to finish my question, guys. Building a career and building a business is no different from building a structure, where you guys are sitting maybe in your school or class, and if a typhoon came today, you won't really be afraid that the roof will cave in over your heads. And the reason is because of your belief that the foundation is properly set. And again, I mentioned foundation, no? And when you really think about it hard, what you have to realize is that the most important part of the room is the one that you don't see, right? So when people look at me and look at me managing my business, they think of the lines, they think of the beauty of the stores. But you ask any business owner who's honest about their literature and the journey of business, and what they will tell you is that more than 80% of the things we do are completely silent. Uh, Majority of which the customers will never hear about. Almost all of them, they'll probably never even learn about. But without it, we can't do the magic. So the foundation is so critical, and foundation is built on suffering. It's built on failure. Uh, it's really having the right approach to the problems in life. If any of you have read Mark Manson's book, he put it there very well. Where don't wish for a life without problems, because that's impossible. Wish for a life instead of good problems. So if I have a problem with my inventory, I have a problem because of a customer complaint, then I get to be in the position where I actually have a customer complaint, because I have a business. I have people coming into my doors. I don't have a problem of people not liking my product, right? So if a problem comes your way, you just have to realize that these are the set of problems that I chose for my life. So it's having a different perspective early on. I think that would have helped with a lot of trials that I went through in my life.
Thank you. It's interesting that, we have accounting students probably watching at this moment. Will rewatch this video in the future and would pay more attention in their subjects. as well as having that right mindset when given a problem. I guess the last question that we'll have for this afternoon is, what will be your message to college students, fresh graduates, Gen Zs, or young millennials, in terms of leading others as well as setting up their own business?
Wow. Okay. So, ooh, obviously a generation much different from mine. I'm a Gen Xer. So what I'd like to say, guys, is that we need to have a conversation between the difference of the perception of success and the realities of it. Most people are just looking at the summit. Most people quit because they're at the base of the mountain and they feel that, hey, I'm not making an impact. But we're forgetting about the journey. And the journey is a long and difficult one. And again, I started my business when I was 15, 16 years old. And one of the things that I'm thankful for is that I had a sense of what you call delayed gratification, where I saved my money from that because that money started my my other business, which led to another business, which led to another business, eventually to this business. And if I didn't do that, which is more than a 25-year journey, we wouldn't be speaking here. I wouldn't have these businesses. So my message to you guys is recognize that the journey is a long one, and it's usually a painful one. Uh, I'll give you a quick example. My daughter is 7 years old, and many times she expresses a desire to instantly become an adult because of the seemingly many associations of rewards that it carries, such as a cell phone or freedom of choice. But we all know that she can't skip puberty to be an adult. She has to go through life stages to be considered grown up. And that's why life is funny and interesting. It incubates us for what we're about to become. And we just have to submit ourselves to the process. And what I mean by that is that a lot of us want to skip the growth part, and probably no one more than me, right? I wanted that too. But it's in the growth part that there are so many important and valuable lessons to be learned, right? The growth part is your foundation. A lot of us have access to social media and we see all these gurus or people who only post about the best of themselves. And it's leading us to anxiety because we're constantly comparing
Right.
what is perceived as the best of other people to our own weaknesses. And a lot of us feel that we need to post or share something in order to feel validated, right? Someone's like or share or heart is not going to validate you. Your actions validate who you are. So uh, recognize that it's a journey that's going to take you much longer than you think. It's going to be much harder than you feel, and you're going to suffer much more than you expect. But nothing will be worth it more. Success and suffering go hand in hand.
What a way to end this session, Ryan. Really good insights. I totally agree that, for someone to be successful, they have to really encounter suffering because that's when you would really enjoy the fruit of whatever hard work you put into something. So, yeah, thank you so much for the session. I hope the students and the viewers who are now watching this session learned a lot from this as much as I learned. And looking forward to another session with you probably in the future if you have time. And for those who are watching, feel free to visit our site at th.prospol.com for opportunities and set up your profile so that you can be aware of the next career talks that we'll have. Next week, we'll have another session on how to look for a job as a fresh graduate in the Philippines. And feel free to get the e-certificate coming from Prospol Philippines as well. Ryan, do you have anything you want to plug to our viewers, like social media or opportunities available?
Well, nothing to plug. I'm not really one for self promotion, although thank you for giving me this opportunity. I just like to thank you, and I'd like to, it's really such a pleasure sharing my space with you guys, and I hope I was able to be of service and of value to you guys as well. I wish all of you luck. Just remember that there are no shortcuts. It's really concentrating on consistency and intensity as well, the big things and the small things.
Nice, thank you. We have a lot of words of appreciation and thank you from our viewers as well. Feel free to comment in our comment section for any highlights, feedback, or any thoughts that you would like to share about this session. And this ends our Career Talk Thursdays Leading Others. Thank you for joining us today again. My name is Trimsel, and follow us and stay tuned on our social media channels for updates. Kita-kits ulit next Thursday. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Ramsal. See you guys.